Have you ever tried to grow your own vegetables indoors? You might be surprised by the variety of things that you can actually grow indoors, and this is just a small selection. I will be running through more in the video along with the care instructions, how to grow them, and some money saving tips so that you can grow your indoor jungle for less with edible plants and benefit from the produce that you're growing. Now if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know this is a bit of a deviation from what I normally cover, which is house plants, but I've tried to keep it to indoor plants, so how you can grow your indoor jungle this time but with edible plants. So there should be something for everyone in the vegetables that I'm going to cover in this video, no matter what space that you've got, whether you've just got a small windowsill for something small to try out, or if you've got quite a lot of space, a good south facing window with good sun, then you can try some of the larger varieties that I'll cover shortly. There are lots of benefits to growing your own, the first being that they taste better than mass-produced commercially grown produce, and you'll also have the satisfaction of knowing that you've grown it yourself. The second is that it can be more economical, so you can buy packs of seeds relatively cheaply and get hundreds of seeds in those packs which all have the potential to become edible plants, and they can also help you to reduce waste, which I'll cover when we look through some of the specific varieties. The third is that your produce is cleaner, so commercially grown produce, because it's mass produced, is often covered in all sorts of chemicals from fertilisers to pesticides. At least if you're growing it yourself, you know exactly what's gone on it. Hopefully, if they're indoors, not many pests, and you won't need to put anything on them, so you'll have clean plants to consume without the worry of any unknown chemicals. And the fourth one is they can help with self-sustainability, so even if you've only got a few edible plants, at least you know they can supplement your grocery orders. They won't necessarily replace them completely, at least you'll have some things to turn to if there are supply chain issues, and you can be a little bit more self-sustainable. So to get started, it's incredibly easy and relatively inexpensive, and I'll share some money saving tips a little bit later on, but what you'll need alongside the space requirements and light requirements, once you've got those, you will just need some soil to grow whatever seeds that you've got in, some seeds for whatever vegetable variety you want to grow, and then some sort of tray or pot that you can grow them in, and it really is that simple. So obviously with all of these, it does depend on the space that you've got and that you can meet the care needs of the plants. So I'll run through all of them, then pick the ones that are right for you, that will fit your space. So we'll start with the pepper, as this is what I've been holding. So you can actually grow peppers of varying different varieties on your windowsills, for example. So the main criteria for these are you need a sunny spot for them. They like a lot of direct sun, so maybe a south facing window, something like that. And they also take up a bit more room than some of the other varieties that we'll talk about, so they can grow quite tall and bushy and need a larger pot. So if you've got the room and a sunny spot, then you could grow peppers in your indoor space. So these are really easy to grow. You can buy them already started off and then grow them on in larger pots, or start them from seed. If you're starting them from seed, it's incredibly easy. Buy a cheap pack of pepper seeds and you just pop them on the level of some soil and then cover it with a thin layer of soil, make the soil moist, cover with a propagator or with cling film or poly wrap, something like that, and keep them warm and moist, and then you should start to see growth within 4 days to 2 weeks. Then once these seedlings are tall enough, you can separate them out into pots to grow on, and then you can grow them in their final pots into slightly larger pots, because they do develop quite large roots as they're quite resource heavy plants. So once you've got them in their final pots, all you need to do is then keep the soil moist, not sitting in water but moist, and give them a regular fertiliser, so diluted water-soluble fertiliser maybe every 1 to 2 weeks. Then when they start to develop flowers and fruit, you can change that to something like a tomato feed, a high potassium fertiliser, to get the best yield from the plant that you've got. And that is pretty much it. Really easy to look after, really easy to grow from seed or bought already started off and then grow to the fruit, and then you should have fresh peppers later on in the season that you can harvest and then put in your salads or your cooking or whatever you decide to use them for. So quick point to note on this, I have seen some resources say that you need a grow light to grow peppers indoors. You can use grow lights if you wish to invest in them. If maybe you've already got them and you want to grow vegetables indoors, a grow light will definitely help, providing you've got an effective one. However, you can definitely grow these without grow lights, providing you've got a good sunny spot that gives them enough sunlight throughout the day. Because I've done it myself and I know others that have. So bear that in mind. If you do read resources that say you need a grow light, you don't necessarily need one. It just depends on the sun that your space gets. Now similar to peppers and actually related to peppers are tomatoes, so you can grow these indoors. You just need to be sure that you get the right variety to grow indoors, and I'll cover that in just a moment. These have very similar to care instructions and growing instructions to peppers, so just like with the peppers, you would get the seeds, which are really readily available in a lot of seed shops, even homeware stores, garden centres, and relatively cheap depending on the variety that you're getting. Put them on a layer of soil, cover with a thin layer of soil, keep the soil moist, cover with some cling film, poly wrap or a propagator, and then keep it in a warm position, and you should start to see growth within about a couple of weeks. Once the plants are large enough, you can pot them up into some smaller individual pots to develop some roots and get a bit larger before you then pop them up into their final larger pots where they will stay to mature and develop fruits. So these have very similar care instructions, as I said, to peppers, in that you'd keep the soil moist and use maybe an all-purpose fertiliser that's suitable for edible plants every 1 to 2 weeks. And when they start to develop flowers and fruit, you can actually get dedicated tomato feed from the shop, and then you can use that to feed them thereafter. Just follow the instructions on the pack, and that same feed can be used for the peppers as well. As I said, they're related, and the main thing about that feed is that it's high in potassium, which helps with the fruit development. So I said it's really important that you get the right variety of tomatoes. So these come in 2 different main varieties. So you've got cordon or indeterminate, and they grow incredibly tall. So you might see these outside or in greenhouses. They can grow up to about 6 feet tall, and they are often staked and produce the larger varieties of tomatoes, although some smaller tomatoes are on those, but they do grow on very large plants. So you're looking for a determinate or bush variety. So these are actually varieties for hanging baskets. So these will be determinate or smaller varieties, so these shouldn't grow too tall. But if you are unsure, just check the label or the seed packet, or even check on Google, just to see that you are getting a bush variety or determinate variety, so that you know that it's not going to grow too large for your space. So going a bit smaller now, we've got beetroot, and this is a fantastic crop for smaller spaces and one that you can get so much of throughout the growing season. So you can use methods of successional sowing and cut and come again with these, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. So you can grow these for the full vegetable, where you harvest that, or just for the salad leaves, for the leaves for your salads even, if you wish to do that instead. And it really depends on what you want them for and the space that you've got. So if you're growing them for the salad leaves, what you can do is, once they start to develop leaves, you can cut the leaves off that you want and leave the plants in the soil so they keep developing new leaves, and then you have a continuous harvest of salad leaves throughout the season. Alternatively, if you are growing them as full vegetables, because they develop and mature quite quickly, you can plant them up every 2 to 3 weeks and start a new tray of seedlings, and then when you harvest these ones, you'll know that you've got more coming on the way that'll be ready in a few weeks, and again, and so on. So you get a continuous harvest of the full vegetables throughout the growing season too. So these seeds are really easily available from garden centres, homeware shops, things like that, and relatively inexpensive too for the amount of seeds that you get. And when you plant them up, all you do is have a tray of soil, and then you put them about 1.5 centimetres, maybe half an inch deep, keep the soil moist, put it in a bright spot, and then wait for the seedlings to start to develop leaves. And then once you start to see leaves, if you're growing them just for the leaves, you can leave them a bit closer together in a tray like this, and then just harvest the leaves as needed once they're large enough. If you are growing them for the full vegetable, you might want to space them out in larger trays or in individual smaller pots, and then that way you can help the vegetables grow to their full potential. So this next one, I'm not going to go into massive detail because you can follow the same instructions that we've just covered for beetroot in terms of growing and care. So with radishes, you can get these in so many different varieties, and again, incredibly cheaply. For the amount of seeds that you get, you could have a really good radish harvest throughout the season. Use successional growing again so that you get a continuous harvest of the full vegetable. You can grow these just for the leaves as well if you wish to, but they grow so quickly, you might as well just wait until you get the full radish, and then just make sure you've got a successional grow going on so that you get that continuous harvest of them. And you get lots of different varieties, so you can get ones that are round, that are single coloured, even black ones. You can get, I think you can get white ones, and you can also get ones that are a bit longer in length as well, depending on what you wish to use them for, whether it's salads or maybe even in cooking. Now this next one is very similar to beetroot and radish in terms of its care and growing instructions, but it's incredibly versatile and a great one to have in the kitchen. You can use it in salads, as microgreens, in cooking, depending on how you grow it. So we've got turnips. An interesting fact about turnips: they were a staple item before potatoes were introduced. So these would have been used in place of potatoes, and can still be. If you choose not to use potatoes, you can use turnips instead if you need that sort of vegetable in whatever you're cooking. So you can grow these as shoots and use them as microgreens, and I'll do a future video on that, on different microgreens. If you'd like to see that, subscribe and then you'll be notified when that video comes out. But these can be used as that, or as salad leaves, just like the beetroot and radish. If you let the leaves grow, then harvest the leaves, or even the smaller fruits can be used, or smaller vegetables even, can be used in salads as well, or let them grow to their full potential and then use them in cooking. And as I said, these are very similar to beetroot and radish in terms of growing and care, so just follow the growing instructions for the beetroot and you'll hopefully have lots of turnips through the growing season too. Now onto another really versatile crop, we've got spinach. So this, in terms of care needs, quite similar to the beetroot and radish, to be honest, and you can actually use this for salad leaves, the smaller tender leaves as salad leaves, or the larger leaves and stalks in cooking, so you can grow it to whatever you then want to use it for once it's grown. So if you are planting it up, you can get the seeds, again, really accessible, and these are probably the cheapest of all of the seeds that I've spoke about or will be speaking about in this video. So 25p is the cheapest that I've found these seeds for, depending on the variety that you're buying. So with spinach, you grow it about 2 centimeters deep in the soil, keep the soil moist, put it in a bright spot, and then wait for the leaves to start to come up. When they start to come up, if you're growing it for the leaves as salad leaves, you can leave them closer together and use it as a cut and come again, just like the beetroot and radish. And then if you are growing them to their full plant, what you might want to do is space them out a little bit in a larger tray, or pop them up individually and let them grow on to become larger plants. And again, you can still use them as cut and come again, where you take off some of the larger leaves as and when needed, or if you take the whole plant before it goes to flower and then use that in whatever you're using it for your cooking. And an important note with spinach is that they don't like too much heat, which can make them bolt and go to flower, and we don't want them to go to flower because that can make them become bitter and woody. So what we ideally want is when it comes to putting them in a bright spot so they get enough light for what they need, maybe put them in a window that doesn't get too much direct sun, or if it does, maybe set them back a bit, because what we don't want is that residual heat from the direct sun. Now I've grouped all of these together because they have very similar growing instructions and care needs, and these are different types of salad leaves. So these follow very similar instructions to the other salad items we've spoken about. You can even buy these as ready mixed seed mixes, so if you didn't want to buy all the separate varieties, just buy a seed mix of salad leaves. So we've got rocket if you like something spicier with a little bit more flavour, different types of lettuce if you like things that are a bit more bitter or things that are a bit more sweet or a bit of colour, so red lettuce or green lettuce. And then also the more formed lettuces, that's the only way that I can think to describe them, like Little Gem or Romaine lettuce, and you'll see that I've already opened these because I've already started to grow these. So it really depends on what you like to have in your salads. But these are, again, incredibly widely available and incredibly cheap. Just like the spinach, as I mentioned, these packs were 25p for a mixed pack of lettuce seeds. So that would give me a tray of lettuce leaves that I can use as a cut and come again and use it as a live salad and harvest it as and when I need it for 25p. So again, really economical. Or if I was doing maybe the more formed varieties like the Little Gem ones and I wanted them to grow to their full potential, I might then space them out a little bit more in trays, or pop them up into little pots separately and then let those grow to their full potential and harvest them completely as and when I needed them. And then with these as well, just like the other salad items, the beetroots, radishes, spinach, you can successionally grow these too. So if you were going to then harvest them completely, or even the cut and come again, sometimes they get tired after a while, so pop these up or plant these up as seeds every 2 to 3 weeks, so that you know that when your first lot are harvested or the cut and come again have got a bit tired, you've then got a new tray. And I actually forgot to mention how to grow these. So as they often have small and lighter seeds, if you're growing them for the cut and come again leaves, it's often easy just to get a tray of soil, sprinkle a light covering of seeds, and then put a light covering of soil over the top. Keep it moist, put it in a bright spot, and then you should start to see the leaves start to develop, which you can then harvest when they're the right size to harvest. If you are growing the more formed varieties, then you might want to thin them out and separate them out into smaller pots, as I mentioned, when they get large enough. Now, keeping with the salad items, and something you can use in salads or in cooking, are spring onions, or scallions, I believe they're also known as. You can get these as salad onions too, which are a little bit fatter but grow very much in the same way. So these are incredibly easy to grow. You can grow them in any space that you've got, so you really don't need a lot of room for these. And the great thing about these as well, you may have seen videos about growing kitchen scraps as well from store-bought items. You can also use these as cut and come again for the greens, or you can harvest them fully for the whole piece of the onion. So these are really easy to grow, so I've just grown them in some of these cell trays, and you don't need to space them out much at all. So in each of these individual cells, I've actually put 5 of these spring onion seeds. I've planted them about 1.5 centimeters deep, and I'll keep the soil moist and put this in a bright spot, so I should start to see growth in about a couple of weeks. They can be quite slow to grow, and then once they're large enough, I can then harvest the greens if I want to, leave the rest in the soil to keep producing greens, and then I've got that constant flow of greens for that flavour in my salads or cooking. Or once they're large enough, harvest the full thing, as I said, and then use that in cooking. And if I wanted to, just like the other salad items, because they're fast growers, I can also successionally grow these. So every 2 to 3 weeks, plant more up from seed, and then I know that once I've used these ones, the next ones are ready to go and have lots of spring onions or scallions throughout the growing season. And also thinking about the economic sides, just like with the other salad items, this says that there are 375 seeds in this pack, so even if 80% of those were successful, if I planted them all, that would be about 300 spring onions that I would get during the growing season if I had the room to grow that many. Then if I was to buy these from the shop, I would probably pay 40 to 60 pence for a bunch of 7 or 8, so that's a massive cost saving by growing my own on my kitchen windowsill, for example, rather than buying them from the grocery store. So this next one might surprise you that you can actually grow indoors, and it's beans, but it's really important that you get the right variety of bean to grow indoors, just like we mentioned with the tomatoes. And similar to the tomatoes and peppers, if you've got the space and sunlight requirements for those, you can also do beans because these do like a lot of sunlight and they are larger plants so need more space. So they're incredibly easy to look after and incredibly easy to grow. Beans are some of the easiest crops to grow and very, very cheap for the yield you get. Again, economical for the yield you get, the amount of seeds that you get. So all you do when you're planting these up is in a tray in seed cells or in pots, directly in pots, get the seeds or beans, pop them up 2.5 centimetres down in the soil and then keep the soil moist, put them in a bright spot, keep them warm. You should start to see growth in a couple of weeks, and when they're large enough you might then start to separate them out. If they're in cell trays like this or they're in trays together, separate them out into their individual pots that they can then grow on to their full potential, but obviously you don't need to do that if you've already potted them up and they'll be staying in the same individual pots. So when it comes to their care needs, keep the soil moist. They can be thirsty plants, so keep the soil moist and give them an all-purpose feed every 1 to 2 weeks, just like with the other larger crops that we spoke about. And very similar to those too, when they come to fruiting, come to producing the beans, you can use the same feed that you use for the tomatoes and peppers even. So tomato feed that's high in potassium, you can use for the beans as well. So when I mentioned getting the right variety for growing, just like tomatoes, they come in 2 main varieties. You get pole varieties, which are very tall, if you think Jack and the Beanstalk, but maybe not that tall. They can grow to about 6 foot tall, need support, need a lot of room in the soil for their roots. You can actually get dwarf varieties. So these are much smaller, they grow more compact and in bushier forms. So these will still require a bit more space than the salad crops we spoke about earlier, but you could still grow these indoors. Now if you want something a little bit different, something with a little bit more flavour and even edible flowers, you could go for something like Nasturtium. So these are trailing or climbing plants if you put support in place, if not they'll just trail, and they produce leaves that are almost like sweet floral tasting rocket, so they've got a bit of a peppery flavour to them but also a very sweet flavour to them. So you can eat the leaves of these plants and you can also eat the flowers, so you can use these flowers as decorative elements in salads or on cakes or things like that. So a really great way to add, again, some more variety to what you've got, and these flowers look wonderful on the windowsill and really brighten up wherever you put these. So a great one for the aesthetic of your home, but you can also eat them too. So these are really easy to grow. They're quite large seeds, and all you do is just plant them about 2 to 2.5 centimetres or 1 inch deep in the soil, keep the soil moist, and then pop them in a bright spot. So they do like a lot of sun, so you can put them in a good bright windowsill, give them the support or just let them trail. And it's as easy as that. Water them when they need to be watered, and then harvest them as and when needed too. Now I forgot to mention this in the individual plant listings, but you might be wondering how these fruit-bearing plants actually develop fruits without pollinators. So obviously outside we've got bees, we've got insects, and they're really important for pollinating flowers so that we get fruit on many different crops. However, with tomatoes, beans and peppers, they're actually self-pollinating, so the flowers are developed with everything they need to pollinate themselves. You don't even need more than one plant, the individual plants can pollinate themselves. So when grown indoors, that's why we don't need the pollinators for these. You might still need to give them a little bit of a helping hand, because even without pollinators outdoors, there's still wind, there's still movement that makes the pollen get around the flower and where it needs to go to pollinate it. So if you have these indoors and they start to flower, you can just give them a gentle shake or move them around, which will help the pollen sort of fall amongst the flower as it needs to. Or you can also use a fan or open the window, a bit of air movement can help. Also, if you feel it really necessary, you can use a soft paintbrush or a cotton bud and gently dab the flowers and move the pollen about in the flowers, and that will ensure that you have a pollinated flower to then develop the fruit, whether it's tomatoes, peppers or beans. Now I did say that I'd share some money saving tips to help you do all of this as economically as possible. So when it comes to growing containers, try and reuse whatever you can find in the kitchen. So fruit punnets are fantastic, and you'll see that a lot of these have already been used. And you've also got mushroom trays as well in various different sizes that make fantastic growing trays if you put holes in the bottom for drainage. or even the larger ones as drip trays to put the smaller ones in, so you don't have to buy any growing containers. If you are a plant enthusiast already, or you have a garden or have plants already, you might have pots that you've not used. And also, just a quick point, I did have some of these cell trays. All of these were free as well, so I got these as bedding plants for the garden, and I always keep these cell trays because I know I'll use them again to grow something else. So when it comes to the soil, do shop around. It is beneficial to buy store-bought soil. You don't want to be taking soil, if you do have a space outside or you can get soil from outside, really you don't want to be taking that from outside because you don't know what is in there, what insects are in there, what larvae, all sorts of other nastiness bacteria, all sorts of things that might be in there because it's outside. So if you're growing things inside, it's always better to buy store-bought soil, ideally some sort of peat-free compost. I don't really make a differentiation between composts that are dedicated for seed growing, as you often pay a lot more for a lot less for those. I just use the cheapest compost that I can find, and that usually suits me well for whatever I'm growing. So just shop around, try and find some peat-free compost, bags of compost that you can then use for your growing efforts, and it really doesn't matter, pay however little you can for it. So when it comes to buying seeds, don't buy branded seeds, just find the cheapest seeds that you can buy from a reputable seller, whether that's online or from a store. So don't worry about buying store-bought seeds, they're no different or inferior to branded seeds. You might have a difference of variety, but they're still going to grow the crop that you're after. So if you're after spinach, both of these are spinach, just different varieties, and one is a lot cheaper. So one thing to look out for is variety. You might want to buy the cheaper variety, as I will touch on that in just a second. But also, if it's the same variety and you've got a branded pack and an unbranded pack, just go for the unbranded pack. For illustration purposes, we've got a branded pack which is £2.29 and an unbranded pack or store brand pack which is 25p. So the branded pack is more than 9 times more expensive than the unbranded pack. So of course I'm going to pay 25p and get this spinach if I want spinach in my crops. Now with these two, I did mention varieties can affect the cost, so these are different varieties. So this one is America, this one is Cello F1. That could account for some of that difference in cost. So this particular variety could be more expensive, so account for some of that cost. If I was buying a different variety from the store-bought options, I can get different varieties of spinach. Some of them may be 75p a pound a pack because they might be those tender stem varieties. However, the brand is adding a lot of that cost to this pack of seeds. So this is nothing against this particular brand, I'm sure it's a fantastic brand, great seeds, but if you're buying them just for your home growing efforts to add to your produce, just buy the cheapest seeds that you can find from a reputable seller. Now you might be wondering why I have a branded pack of seeds when I'm telling you not to buy branded seeds, and there's a very good reason which leads nicely into the next cost saving method for saving money when growing your own vegetables, and it's planning ahead and hitting the seed sales. So this was on a sale of about 75% off, and I got this for about 60p, so it was £2.29, but I got it for around 60p, whatever 75% off is of that. So that's the only time I'd buy branded seeds, when they're on sale. And I know at the end of the growing season, so September, October, lots of places that sell seeds will start to sell them off, so half price, maybe even more, as we've seen with those branded ones. This particular shop that I go to get most of my seeds, because they're fantastically priced, will do a half price sale. So I know that all of these seeds I can get for 50p rather than a pound, or 37p rather than 75p, and I can buy them for the following year. All of the seeds packets have about a 2-year life before the best before, but even then, kept in the right conditions, cool, dark place, they can last a lot longer. So you could possibly buy seeds half price or more off and use them the following year and the year after, because you'll have hundreds of seeds to use. So you can really make savings when you hit the seed sales at the end of the growing season. You just need to plan ahead for it. So do you grow any of those vegetables indoors that I've just mentioned? If not, I hope it's inspired you to give some a try. If you do grow any other varieties, let us know in the comments below, as I'd love to see what they are and maybe try them myself. Now I did say that this deviates from my usual houseplant content, albeit sticking with indoor plants, and I will be doing a follow-up video on microgreens to supplement what you're growing for your salads and your cooking. So if you'd like to see that, then subscribe to be notified when that video is out, or if you do like houseplant content, then subscribe for that. I'll have new videos every week, usually on a Sunday. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments below and I'll respond to everyone, and as always, thank you for watching Grow Your Wellbeing.